We spoke a lot during the previous part about what happened, right? About what the score of Russia against Ukrainian movement during this year. Now I'd like to talk with this very distinct panel about what do we have to do with that, and how does that impact Ukraine's outlook for future after our victory. And today, this is a really very distinguished panel, and I'm honored that you all agreed to take part. And I just would like to introduce everyone, starting from my left, Vlada Shkovan. He's an alternative director at the IMF, director for Ukraine and 14 more states, and a very, very passionate educator as well. Harry Anthony Paternos is an advisor to the chief economist at the World Bank, and previously he led the European engagement of the World Bank and worked a lot with us in Ukraine on making Ukraine's education better. Charles Norris, Deputy CEO of the Global Partnership for Education, very important agency right now in Ukraine that will help to get back our education on its feet. The most favorite ambassador of all times for all the Ukrainians, honestly, without exaggeration, Ambassador William Taylor, who is now also Vice President at the Institute for Peace in the United States. And also, I'm happy that we also have one real educator in our panel. Dan Lindertvik is a co-founder with Serkan Robinson, whom you for sure all know, of a community what schools could be, and a person who can help us hopefully to reimagine those schools that will be built. So, yeah, Ambassador, I would probably start with you. We talked a lot about the scale of destruction. Kharkiv region has more than 50 schools that are gone, and the war is ongoing, and every day we have more and more damage. But the justice is much slower than the destruction done by Russia to us. Do you think it would be possible to force Russia to pay back what it did, including in education? Do you think it's feasible?
I do, Anna, for a number of reasons. One is, let me acknowledge Vlad Russman's great work as the IMF just announced yesterday, or therefore $15.6 billion for Ukraine. Vlad. And the Russians need to supplement that, and the Russians need to supplement that in a big way. And it turns out that the Russians made a big mistake. They thought they had the ability to withstand the sanctions that they knew they were going to incur when they invaded. And they have $600 billion of reserves. The mistake they made was $300 billion of those reserves in G7 banks. They're in banks in G7 countries. $300 billion. If the reconstruction, if the overall reconstruction, Vlad will know better than I don't know what the estimates are, but if it's going to cost $500 billion, $750 billion more each day as the destruction goes on. But let's say it's $750 billion, $330 billion of Russian money to go to that reconstruction. Now, absolutely right. But it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work here in this city. The Canadians have shown that it's possible to do it. They passed a law that says those frozen assets in Canada, there's about $15 billion in Canada. There's about $40 billion in the United States. So those frozen assets can be seized if there is the legal authority to do that. Some argue that the President already has legal authority. Some argue that he needs new legislation. I predict that in this country, there will be the strong support by the U.S. Congress, Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan, to take $50 billion of Russian money, central bank reserve, Russian central bank reserve, and put it into a fund for Ukrainian fund. The World Bank may play a role in that. The Ukrainian government will play a role in that, but the Russians need to provide that money, and part of that ought to go to the
Well, the downtown very honest, and I do hope that will happen sooner than the very much anticipated victory, because as we saw from the research, the recovery is actually ongoing in Ukraine. A lot of schools are recovering and we can see funds for that. Charles, you lead global partnership for education and you work globally. You work with countries that suffer from wars, that suffer from natural catastrophes, like Turkey recently. What are the do's and don'ts, right, in this whole construction effort? And what would you advise to the recently appointed Minister of Education on this task?
Well, first, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here on this important topic of Ukraine and Ukraine's education. Now, we look at it that every child deserves and needs a quality education, regardless of where they live. And so when we look at this, it's not just about the child and their potential that needs to be achieved, but it's also about that country, that society, their ability to grow the economy, to ensure that they have a resilient society, and that they can also, in case of conflict or other disaster, they're able to recover. Now, we work in 86 countries, and around the world, almost half of them are either fragile or in conflict. So we know that the needs of a country are going to vary dramatically from one to another, and therefore we must meet a country where they are. This means, obviously we work in places like Syria, in Yemen and Afghanistan, which are obviously very different from Ukraine. So where we begin is by saying we have to work with that government. Where there is a recognized government, we need to work with that government. So that government is leading the process of on the education system, bringing together all the partners, international and domestic, to focus in on what the key priorities are. And then we can support them by bringing in our support and aligning others behind those priorities. It's also important to, as we're dealing with the immediate emergency, to be also looking at the longer run. So where is the education system needs going forward, not just what we need today. Now, in a case like Mali, for example, in the north, we're supporting them in an emergency way to provide education for the children more affected by conflict and instability. At the same time, we're strengthening that government's ability to deliver education and increasing enrollment, ensuring that the girls who are dropping out rapidly are staying in school longer, and overall strengthening that education system. So these are the kinds of things we tend to do. I think the final point, I think, is the international community needs to be flexible. We need to have mechanisms that can support the country's needs, not our ideas of what the country needs. And so we come at this with our ability to immediately disperse 20% of the allocated funds for a country on an emergency basis, rather than going through a lengthy process. But in exceptional cases, we will go beyond that. When COVID-19 hit, we had emergency authorization from our board to move $500 million to 66 countries in under 6 months. And for many of those countries, it was the only support they had to adapt to that crisis. So these are the kind of things I'm looking at, is having the leadership of governments, bringing all the partners together, is about having the eye on the immediate needs as well as the long term. And finally, it's about being flexible and how we're responding in support of the government.
I know that GBE is now allocating around $40 million to recovery for education. And well, you mentioned that GBE and other partners have to follow Ukraine's request, but we've never been in a situation like this. We've never experienced this scale of destruction, and we never had experience of recovery. So I do hope that GBE and other partners would also be able to enrich with those experiences, that those solutions that work on this path, because it's a very important for us. So
I could tell you a bit more about that 40 million if you like, but maybe you want to talk to other questions first and come back.
Harry, we work a lot with Harry and his team in in Ukraine or in Ukraine, World Bank's team on Ukraine here in DC quite a lot on making our quality better. We just before the war, we started a great project on higher education reform, and then supported that with $200 million. Now, part of those funds are allocated to support teacher salaries because the Ukraine was all the funds going to military cannot say that. So just to say that we have a great cooperation prior to that with Ari, and unfortunately now as Ukraine has to shift our focus to retain access to education and not talking unfortunately just yet about equality. Ari, I know you worked a lot on learning loss and 2 years of COVID, and for us now it's the year of war. It's that intangible, invisible thing that you can't touch it. You can see the bomb shelter, you can see the damaged school, but you can't see the learning loss. What to do with that? And 2 years of COVID has been a great, well, not great, but it's been a time to think about the solutions, right? What would you recommend again, by the new minister to do with this equality?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation and thank you for the participation and the introduction to the minister. As you know, crises, pandemics, earthquakes, wars, strong learning, and we estimated what that means in terms of learning outcomes. Fundamentally, brings Ukraine down to where they were to. At this rate, become one of the lowest performing countries in Europe in terms of learning losses. We estimate that Sweden will close for up to 36 weeks because of COVID, and then with the invasion, that's another at least 9, maybe 10 months of disruption because of the war itself. Putting that all together, that reduces the learning outcomes from using PISA scores here, 481 to 121, so very low level of learning if nothing is done. In terms of long-term losses, the students themselves, when they graduate, their earnings will be that much lower because of the loss of schooling. National income will be much lower. I estimate conservatively at least $22 billion lost future earnings, but it could be more than $200 billion depending on assumptions about people's work. What to do about it? I think some of those answers have already been made. The minister talked about this, the staff talked about this. Learning continuity, reaching the students where they are, whether it's displays by video, by telephones, and classes when they can be conducted. The other thing is, if you love some of the research you did, is connecting with students. They lost contact. We're doing a project with the Teach for Ukraine, with the Authorization Ministry of Education, to do online tutoring. This will give the students some connection with the person, young person, who can help them with their studies, also help them connect. These approaches have been quite effective during the pandemic. Spain really reduce learning losses is being used as part of the rebuilding in many countries. That's something that could continue and help build the system as we transition post-war. The other thing is students will be at different levels of learning. You saw that in your own research. They'll have different needs. We need to reach them where they are, teach at the right level, teach at the level of students so that they're getting back to where they were. Because students, remember, will have lost the opportunity to learn instruction, but also to get what they learned before. Students need to catch up with what they need to rebuild. I think the future is going to be a hybrid education. I think that it's necessary in the things we learn. It's also useful, and we've seen the research on this and the technologies there. I think this is where I would put a lot of resources is getting the children the support they need to get back to where they were and build a system that uses the best technology along with the.
Yeah, just to say, well, that support in Teach for Ukraine and all in the US, probably know Teach for America, it's a spin-off of that in Ukraine, and there is now national scale program with for the World Bank on enduring, and that's probably the only thing so far, the only national scale level that is working with learning. Plus, you are a very high level financial executive, but in Ukraine, you are also known as a person who loves education a lot. So tell me, is education on the table was when you discuss multi-billion support to Ukraine, but also what's your somber take on the economic consequences of this sort of project?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for organizing. I just want you to a little bit to reflect what happened during the presentation. After 2 years of COVID, after thousands of different, presentations within online, webinars, etc., you saw how the adults were trying to arrange the voice on a simple video in the presentation in a very calm center of Washington, with a warm room without any stress. Okay. Now add a little bit to this, turning off the internet, turning off the electricity, cheating, listening the siren, thinking about the security of your life, not for 1 minute, but for 13 months. This is what Ukrainian kids experience now. The war is not finished at all, and it still continues. Therefore, unfortunately, the damages also for the infrastructure, which today, by the way, the World Bank presented Kyiv, and Anna Bierda today, senior vice president from World Bank is Kyiv, and I was trying to arrange a meeting with the minister there. He's talking about, and actually after the housing and infrastructure, the schools are the biggest reconstruction needs for Ukraine. And I fully agree with the minister who said that education is our second problem. I mean, we cannot win the war and lose the education, lose the future of our kids. And here, you asked the question, I would take it more seriously than just rebuilding schools. It takes much more. We need to reimagine the education. I remember our discussion in IMF a few years ago about this school. I have a book at home where I watched a video about the schools. This is what we need also to have a braveness as Ukrainian soldiers, as Ukrainian people. Be brave. You started a lot of reforms in Ukraine. Now hopefully to continue to administer. We need to reimagine education. Because let's be frank, the Ukrainian education before the war was also failure. Now we have through this tragedy, we have a chance, to change. But looking at this chance, we need to look at this in a more sophisticated way, because while we focus on the more younger kids in Ukraine and the schools, I mean the educational problem, as Minister was saying, is wider. So just think about it. While I said about the kids who are now in Ukraine, another group of kids left Ukraine, and totally my understanding around 6 million kids were affected by the war. 650 are currently outside of the country. They were not prepared for that. Sorry, they were not prepared to study, in Czech language, in Slovak language, in Danish language, in Dutch language. Unfortunately, I believe for them as well, it's a big portion of the education that we lost. But the kids are very keen to integrate, much better than the adult people. And they will do it. So they will lose, there will be huge losses for education. And I fully agree with you, there will be huge losses for their future revenues if we don't do our job. But they are there now. If next year we'll go there. The kids already will know language. And maybe for the kids themselves, could be, I don't know, not bad staying in Denmark. For Ukraine, it's a loss unbearable. Demography of Ukraine was bad before the war. Now it's a drama. it's a disaster. So we need to do everything possible to bring back the kids home. And the schools, both with security for sure. That's why the shelters, as the minister said, is so important. Immediately, the schools are very important as an anchor for the adults, for the parents to come back. And if they will not come back, the kids will be, if the parents will make a trade-off to stay abroad. Now it's more mothers, but tomorrow when we win the war, the fathers will have to decide. Either they will join the mothers and kids abroad, or they will come everybody together. We need to make everything possible then to come back. And for that, schools should be there, security, but not only, we discussed also the internet. I fully agree with you, the education will be hybrid. We need to do everything possible that the Ukrainian villages, the Ukrainian cities will be, connected to the schools will be connected to internet. Also the question of laptops or the devices, and say clearly the telephone is not the best solution for education. But even the telephone can be sometimes a good instrument device for education if you design your products for the telephone. Because clearly it's not easy to teach the classes, but you can do some part of there. It means that it should be reimagination, the educational program. There should be a lot of the hackathons. I don't know for that. I'm not sure if the minister used this word because we discussed this. Like we have the military Rammstein, and I was one of those who created the economic Rammstein, which is a coalition, as you were saying. We need educational Rammstein. We need to have efforts, from Finland, from Denmark, from US, from our countries in Latin America and Western Europe, and everybody should be in a coordinated way. We need to coordinate. Someone will do the buses, someone will do the laptops, someone will do the internet, and this is the coordination of it. I think is one of the strongest efforts from the fund. I came here from the board meeting at the IMF where we have the head of United Nations Refugee Organization, Filippo Grandi, and I was speaking there, and I was saying also about education. It's one of the important efforts which UNICEF, which UN should play, but also your NGO clearly will play. So I can assure you that education is clearly not as much as important as winning the war for us.
Thank you, Max. And, yeah. So, yeah. This is, as Vlad said, it's a chance for us to do much better once we rebuild, right? It's a tragic, but the chance. You've been championing that whole idea of doing much better and reimagining schools around the United States, and on travel to all the states here visited hundreds and hundreds of schools. What are your tips to us? How do we actually do that turnover once we rebuild the schools?
I was sitting in the back. I'm going to stand up because I know how hard it is. First, I will say on behalf of someone not Ukrainian,
Yes.
we are so inspired by your courage, by your determination. I mean, this is a leading light for democracies that are addressed around the world. So I have a lot of emotion and empathy for what you're going through. I came today with a sense of optimism and a sense of dread. So let me start with the dread. If in fact you set your sights on returning to normal, which happened in the US after COVID, if we could just get back to normal, if you set your sights on returning to normal, you will fail. The global education model, the model that determines the lives of kids around the world, is failing. It's why the US democracy is teetering. It's why democracies are in retreat. Kids are sitting in school, largely receiving information they have no interest in, they don't retain, and it is largely decoupled from what they'll ever use in life. What we saw in COVID in the United States, and it was not a category in your list of how kids are engaging with their learning. Kids who have voice in their learning, who feel it has real purpose, who have learning how to learn skills, who have access to the resources to help them make progress, who take pride in work they accomplish that has a real sense of purpose. Those kids will learn more in a month than most kids will learn in 5 years. That's just a fact. If you want a real wake-up call about the failure of our high-stakes test in education, I would beg you, Google GPT-4. Okay, so everything you read about ChatGPT was, oh my gosh, this high school English class did it. Turns out writing is artificial intelligence weak spot. Okay, weak spot. On the bar exam given to lawyers, graduating lawyers, so you've been through undergrad, high school, undergrad, 3 years of law school. In 6 months, artificial intelligence has gone from the bottom 10% on the bar exam to the top 10%. On the GRE verbal, it's in the top 1%. That's graduate record thing. Someone that has the courage, and I am praying you do, to say we're going to let kids leverage the advantages instead of compete against them. Because what breaks my heart in the United States today, and it would be true in the most expensive private schools here and through schools throughout the country, is we still pit kids against what automated solutions do incredibly well. And we, in the process, you watch 5-year-olds with incredible curiosity and creativity and a love and a zeal for learning turn into United States high school kids who only question is, will this be on the test? Who are good at jumping through hoops that are pretty pointless, who think that the whole answer is just more years of formal education, and end up coming out, cut off, adrift, not able to critically think, not feeling a part of things, and then vote for frigging Donald Trump and support these idiot politicians in our country that question whether we should be supporting. So you could, with proper choices, be the world's leading light in democracy and autonomy and military strength in 10 years. I mean, that's not an overstatement. You could do that if you have the courage to make good choices today. But if you settle for back to normal, you'll never catch up. And this whole thing about learning loss, I want to just address that. I'll shut up. Every time I ask somebody to retest kids 3 weeks after the test to confirm that what we thought they had learned is actually retained, there is, you can't lose something you never had, right? You can't learn something you ever had. And I've got anecdotes in my book, and I've interviewed people where you actually go retest kids on stuff they don't care about that they're memorizing for a short-term period for a test. It's just gone. It's gone. It's like drawing in and building sandcastles on the beach. And what you find though is the kids that take on something they believe is important, with a sense of purpose, that changes their lives, changes their community, changes their country. So,
But if I may just.
Yeah.
Well, while we're still standing, so what would be the 3 main things to do in order not to get back?
okay, so I will draw on, and I can connect with Posse Solver.
Oh, we know that.
But you know,
Great.
Great. Posse explains that Finland's gift was crisis. They had a budget crisis. They didn't have enough money. They had to decide, do we put more money in teacher training or more money in data? They said, we're going to put the money in teacher training and forget about data. No standardized tests. They actually don't have, you go to Finland, even high school kids, an hour a day of homework. I think, thought-provoking challenges, kids with autonomy, kids that feel their school is important. Where do they go on the piece of the test? Boom, to the top. So yeah. So I would say, you said the important things, I would say, don't worry about the data. Rethink your accountability measures from scratch. Look for kids who have been able over the course of years of school to demonstrate they can create and invent initiatives that make their world better. Unbelievable. Wouldn't that be a great thing? And when they do, and when they get better and better at that, they will leave school and they will be unbelievable contributors to the future.
Thank you, Dan. I see the question. We will keep them. If I might get, sorry, excuse me, if we can keep questions, till the end of the panel, and then we'll have a few minutes. Just to be aware of your time, and we are why not right now, okay, but I still want to ask you one more round of questions. Ambassador, Clark mentioned the huge outflow of young people who will most probably, well, not most probably, but there is a high chance that they will not return. And for a lot of countries, I think in Poland, it's been the economy that has been growing after this kind of scale war, and it's let's say their interest to keep to bring their trade. But what does Ukraine have to do in order to get our technologies back? And the sub-question, do you think that a massive war program is possible after we have victory and good engagement? Hundreds of thousands of US dollars here to help us to get back.
On your question about return, I've been impressed at the number of who are coming back. I don't know the numbers, but the anecdotes are that there are more people coming back in right now than are going out. The net flow is in. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Lon's at least nodding, and he knows more about numbers than I do. So I had my discussions with Greg over the phone, some there, I've visited there, is that this war is changing Ukraine for the better. I mean, we know the damage, we know the destruction, we know the killing, we know the losses of soldiers, civilians, but there is a renewal. My sense is, but glad tell me, you can tell me it's fine. My sense is there's a renewal commitment to the country. And that's gonna bring people back. That's gonna bring people back. And on your question about volunteers coming to Ukraine, you can see it already. You can see, we've not encouraged people to go to Ukraine yet. After the victory, which I think will come this summer, then they will know.
Well, let's remember the case of Georgia, right? How many US including volunteers have turned the country into a completely English speaking one, right? And change, influence also a lot of education system. So we are hopeful that we will have that as well. Charles, we understand that we are also competing with other countries, competing with other crises, right? With other wars, with earthquakes. I know from a lot of international partners that after Turkey happened, the global funds to Ukraine really slowed for a while. How do we, how do I say, compete for this assistance globally?
So I'll say from the perspective of GPE, you're not competing. We made an allocation for Ukraine from the beginning. Even before Ukraine joined the partnership last November, there was already a $40 million allocation sitting there for Ukraine. So the competition is not there. The question is how do you leverage that funding to bring in more resources and get those resources aligned with the needs of the country. So in the case of Ukraine, what we've done there, even before Ukraine joined the partnership for the last year, we've been working with the ministry to strengthen the coordination in the sector. The Finnish embassy and UNICEF, our coordinating agents in Ukraine, have been working to support the government in building that sector coordination and planning. That has led to the unlocking of a part of our $40 million. Now, the government has submitted an application for $25 million. And I should say this unlocking mechanism, we're usually looking for a 3-to-1 match from other sources. So you can imagine the amount of money, it starts to grow significantly from the 40 million. But for private sector, private companies and foundations, we're looking for a funding. And so the Ukrainian government came in with an application for $25 million, matched by Google and Microsoft, $25 million. So that's $50 million that we're now we're taking to our board shortly for approval. And those funds will then be used targeting children who've been displaced, children in the East, children in the South, strengthening the distance learning platforms and with devices as well as free software licenses and such, but also the teacher training, psychological support, capacity building, and ensuring that children have a safe place to learn. So this is where we are coming at, we use these mechanisms to draw in other sources to entice others to put their money up and match what we're doing so we can get behind you and your priorities. So that's where we stand now. We have $15 million left. I feel like I'm on National Public Radio. We have $15 million. Who wants to, see me after the show, and we'll looking for a 3-to-1 match. We have 15 minutes to go in this session. So we're there and we're pushing hard, but making sure that we can support Ukraine not just in this emergency, but in the long term in terms of building the education system that's needed.
My intent was not to interrogate you on how much you give to Ukraine, but just to understand what's the real play in this whole issue, because that's important. Harry, I know that you also work a lot on public private partnership. And to me, for instance, charter schools, I know it's a very contested issue in some states here, there are good charters, there are bad charters. But for Ukraine, that's might look as a solution for getting out of this crisis and educational side. Do you think that there are other tools from the DPP modality to help them to help us?
For sure, and I was going to say, when Chad, he was mentioned that, you know this, maybe not everyone knows, this, some of the most, advanced AI companies working in I would say loosely working in this space are ready. If anyone ever goes on to YouTube, you see the ads for Grammarly, that's a training company, so you already have much of the new technology that's needed. And partnership would be an excellent idea. I think the bringing in technology that's homegrown already in Ukraine, but adapted to the education is really a step towards creating not normal, but better education system. I think the partnerships at the grade level make a lot of sense. I think besides technology, I think there are many that want to work in the education space that could give it that value. You mentioned charter schools in the US, there are public charter schools, there are public schools under the authority of the state. So it's not the private pricing or giving up the public authority for schools. So I think that with an education plan from the ministry and then allow different players to come in to support the system as it grows. You know, Korea did this post-war, a country that was at 90% adult illiteracy at war, to become one of the top performing education systems for the generation. They didn't have technology, so they do this outdoor classrooms and unqualified teachers. You don't have to talk. So I think a lot can be done, but it has to be touched. One thing Korea did was if they focused on basic education, they allowed more partnership with the higher level as they went to. You're several steps ahead of that. I think partnerships could be used strategically to create this new system. And the partnerships with the Ukrainians, obviously non-traditional partners, the AI companies, others, but also a lot of international interests to support this.
Thank you, Ted. Well, I will keep you as Ukrainian to work on. Then I would like to ask you about teachers, because without them, nothing will happen. No around, no better schools, nothing. Now they are dead. Now they have to find ChatGPT or somehow integrate it into their work. But as we saw from the research, they also have to find a tremendous fatigue and double workload. So in that situation, how do we actually work with this? Where do we find friends? And I ask you that because we work a lot with schools after COVID, where teachers were also exhausted.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping you don't have school boards like we do, because,
No,
you know.
so why don't you take it over?
But there's just a tremendous amount of attack and animosity directed to US teachers today. It's very counterproductive. But generally, I'd say that the teachers that view their role as helping each child find their superpower and encourage them and guide them and direct them and connect them to others, those are the teachers that feel joy. But the teachers that have to lecture the kid on something they know the kid's not interested in. It was bad in person, it's terrible on Zoom, back in person, still bad. I mean, so what we find in general, and one of the great feedbacks I get, we had this online platform and we had a number of great teachers from Ukraine on the platform, but connecting with each other and having that sense of community. And the teaching profession, one of the most isolated professions in the world. And if you want kids to be great collaborators, we need to encourage teachers to be great collaborators. If you want kids to cut across disciplines, you need teachers to be able to move across disciplines. I'm working with Arizona State University on a very different teaching model, which might be very interesting. They're trying to get us away from one teacher per classroom, where if that teacher's out, you've got a real problem, where that teacher needs to be pretty good at a bunch of things, to a model that's team-based teaching, completely different, but it means people can plug in very different ways. Kids get exposure to adults, got a number of different adults, and where they've done that, it's extraordinary. It's just that upside potential. Kids going fast on what they care about. Kids with learning how to learn skills, teachers trusted, and teachers and students working collaboratively. I think that's where you see extraordinary gains. And so it is a difficult, we face that here. I mean, the teachers are leaving the profession in droves or feeling shut down because they're going to be vilified on social media. Where does that lead us? I'm deeply worried about where it leads us. But I would say that idea of a model, I can connect you with all the ASU folks, they're fantastic, but trusting teachers, encouraging them to model what you want from kids, collaborative, reading, problem solving, curious, be modeled up in the teaching profession, and being able to put people in different ways. Powerful.
Thank you. Well, I would like to end this discussion with your final contribution. You mentioned educational Rammstein, and in military Rammstein, there is always a lot of priorities. We need anti-missile, we need tanks, we need articles, we need all other things in the order of priority. Where would we start in education? What are our priorities? Because obviously we can't help each sphere and everything.
You said that I'm a non-independent indicator. I did, was working with the university as a teacher, and I gave my first lecture when I was in the field, but I'm not a minister of education. Minister of education said about this. I spoke with his team. I strongly believe they are correct. The problem is the education is not something which you can put on pause and you think I will do here, this will be my priority. Unfortunately, while you will work on the elementary school or even in the kindergarten, there is a cohort of kids who need to graduate and they need to think tomorrow about their, the college, and so unfortunately the minister will have to do a lot of this. If you look about, and this is when I speak about the kids, more needs of the kids and families. We speak about the general economy, on top of the security, which the minister said, and I think the number one priority anyway for any people, for any parents, for any kids. The second one would be the opportunity, to turn people back to the country, mostly the parents. We need to create the opportunity for the reconstruction, so there will be a process which will be a magnet for parents still to be there while the kids will join them. And this is your job, the minister, I advise the minister to create some sort of the council of the ministers, so you should expect to come as one of the advisors anyway. But the next one is clearly we need to rebuild the country in general. And again, before the war, we had so many lawyers in the universities and so little number of people who want to work in the factories. Unfortunately, we need to have much more builders, construction workers, road builders. Now, they created the agency for government created agency for reconstruction. Mustafa Yen is ahead of it. They simply don't have enough capacity, human capacity to do this. There is some money, maybe, but they don't have enough people, some of them on the front line. So unfortunately or fortunately, the minister will have to focus on, like after the Second World War. So my father was born in 1946, therefore he was in that small cohort of kids who studied at school 7 years, not 12, but 7. Because after the war, you need to have people to send to the technical professions in order to go to work tomorrow to raise the economy. Unfortunately, I think this will be one of the calls also to the minister, because we need to rebuild the country. And until we will manage to become also a magnet for other countries, other citizens to join Ukraine, because incoming immigration will be also important. So this will be second, the security, the issue, the issue of the technical professions. Something which doesn't cost anything for us. I will start tomorrow. I will really push from the minister and to other ministers that stop translating the foreign cartoons to Ukraine. let kids watch them in English. And if we would have done it 50 years ago, we would already have the full generation kids speaking, or people speaking English. Like it's done in Scandinavian countries. No? It's doesn't got any. No,
That's why we love Latin Ukraine, because he's always full of very creative.
yeah, and the fourth one is we still do, you know, what Dad now said. The kids already they learn anyway, any day. Every day they learn something from TikTok, they learn something from YouTube. You know, we went before the war. We went with my son to Lviv. He was on the jazz festival. He watched the piano playing. He fell in love with music. He came back home, asked to buy for him a piano. He went to YouTube and started learning how to play piano. They said, "This is I cannot help you. I don't understand anything." He understood the notes. He understood the so. And later we hired a teacher. You know, so these kids are different. You know, they want to be. There is still a lot of interest in education. You know, I wrote yesterday, for example, on Facebook that I would encourage the parents in Ukraine to read, maybe, you know, like read or to listen to kids, the book of like 2041 of the artificial intelligence. Small novels about the future, but there is also analysis of, there is also about GPT-3, one of the, because it was written in 2021. But for parents to see what kids can get from there, I mean, like they're 12 years old, 13 years old, to get something from there, because there will be a huge number of professionals, you know, which we don't know now, which our teachers unfortunately don't know now, but the kids might be interested, and we need to create the environment for that. And you know, to study. And I would encourage each of you in this room to leave this room today with only one from the idea is, or one question: what will I do in the next year in order to help Ukrainian kids to catch up? Also with you know, educational losses, but clearly to help to reimagine the education that they will be the winners. We will also not only win the war, which for sure we will, but also win the peace, and our kids will be integrated in the government. And thank you for that. What will you do? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vlad. I promised just for one or two questions, probably for extending this, but if you could, yeah, what's your question?
Sure. I would introduce myself, Maya Ormsby, and so long. Maya Ormsby, and I collaborated with two wonderful nonprofits, Earthling Hub and Global Education Ambassadors, truly grassroots organizations. I just can't agree more with Ted, who kind of advertised what we call in our organization inquiry-based education. Inquiry-based. Look at what we do now in Ukraine. We work primarily with.
Do you have a question? Do you have a question, or you can just
How to scale it up. So
okay?
I'll-
Yeah, let's
I'll
go with
give
question
it- yes.
here. Yeah, very good.
So, we work at orphanages, extracurricular activities at the orphanages and IDP centers. So the question is, we are now doing it with a group of volunteers. How to scale it up, how to educate Ukrainian speaking teachers, provide them with methodologies.
Who do you want to address that question to?
Well, the idea, but I'm not sure money is there, so where's the money? To scale up.
Or is the money to scale up? Well, I don't know, well, maybe.
$15 million. There's 25, that's
Okay, thank you very much. I'm aware that we are being late, and I would be encouraged to talk after the event in the hall here. I appreciate tremendously you being with us here today, and I also appreciate the audience coming. Just for FYI, we gathered here today. Some people left, but we gathered State Department, two different USAID came to visit us. A lot of international organizations that are active or also in Ukraine, Save the Children, Church Aid, and also a lot of people joined us online, and I'm really glad and happy that we brought this education as a part of, as an essential part of recovery today. And mixed a little bit with politics, right, because education has to be in it, as well, and gentlemen, I'm honored and glad that you've been here with us today, and next time, I promise that there will be much more women and Sega in 2000 months. Women, so now we have at least 5. Yeah, fix that next time. Thank you very much.